Good afternoon and welcome to Breaking Fry Bread. I'm Dave. This is Ty. Ty, what's up, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing good. Long time no talk. How you been?
I've been outstanding. How have you been?
I've been good. I've been good, man. I see you're traveling everywhere, um, spreading the word, doing business, all these conferences, just having you're moving with purpose and you're moving with love.
I'm having a good time. I'm having a good time. And I'm always taking my family. I think that's the most important thing. Business is going to go up, it's going to go down. There's so many things I can't control. The ex CEO of Coca-Cola, I think he said it best, and this is something that I take with me every day. And what he said was, consider life a series of glass balls. And he said your family is a glass ball. Your marriage is a glass ball. Your health is a glass ball. Your kids are a glass ball. And the thing is that if you drop any one of those glass balls, they break and they shatter. You can't put them back together again. But work is a rubber ball. You can bounce it and it'll come back. You can bounce it and it'll come back. You're going to have good times. You're going to have bad times. But at the end of the day, you got to take care of what matters most. And it's so easy, I think, to get lost on that track of just priorities in life. And the thing that I think is important, and I'll ask you this question: how well do you know, or did you know, your great great grandfather?
Not very well at all.
Not very now at all. What do you know about him?
A great great grandfather.
Yep.
Um, well, my great grandfather was Chief Charlie Satiacum. And without looking at the family tree, to be honest, I couldn't even tell you who my great great grandfather was. But yeah,
And was he born in the 1900s, do you know, or was it late 1800s or
yeah, he would have been in the 1800s, late 1800s.
late 1800s? So 120, 130 years ago. Not that long. In the grand scheme of the life of the world. And I think that's a really good reminder in life, is that we're going to accomplish things and we're going to do things and they're going to have some meaning, but they're not going to have meaning past 80 years, 100 years. It's just not going to happen. We're like a speck of sand. And if we lose track of our family, if we lose track of what's important, there's no point in anything. I'm a believer in this. So while I take these travels for work, which I enjoy, I never want to lose sight of having my kids with me. I never want to lose sight of having my wife with me. And, I see you put all the time on social media, Panda the Wrestler. You got Panda the Wrestler hooking it up. And I think that's a good thing because, your kids are close. Once your kids hit, 15, 16, they're kind of out. They're kind of out. They might be close, but they've got, dual purposes now. They've got dual relationships. They're creating this thing on their own. 18, 19, 20, gone. They might check in on Saturday. They might come around on the holidays. They're gone. You devoted your whole life to them. The time you have with your kids is so short.
Absolutely.
That's what I got about family. What do you think?
I'm with you. And any time I travel for work, I'd love to have my family there with me also when I can, because at the end of those conferences, it's great to go out and enjoy, you know, wherever we're at, and in everything that they have there in that city or whatever. But the bulk of our travel, fortunately for us, has been for sports and with my kids' sports. And so uh, we'll travel as a team to all these wrestling tournaments, and the kids will work their butt off competing, and then we always make sure to have fun and enjoy the family time. And but I'm right there with you. My family always comes first. My kids are always coming first, and anything that I do, any decision that I make, it always starts with them.
Yeah, I love
So
that. Speaking of things going on in Indian country, you never know if the news is accurate or the news is inaccurate. So I can't tell whether this is 100% true or not. But I saw a statistic come out that said 97% of male Native American people are couch surfing, addicted to drugs, or in jail. They fall into one of those three buckets. And that Native Americans have the highest rate of incarcerated men per capita against any other ethnic group.
interesting.
Do you find that to be an accurate statistic?
I would have to, cite your source, but it doesn't sound far off.
So there's
It
some
does not
truth to
sound
do it.
far off.
It could be 85%.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of missing family on the tribes.
There's a lot of generational trauma, that people don't quite understand, that not only do we carry from our parents and our grandparents, but it's actually embedded into our DNA. These traumas that our ancestors endured centuries ago have followed through the chain of DNA and are still with us today. And I think the biggest sign of that is our reservations. We have a lot of natives in Indian country that have never left the reservation. They don't know how to walk in two worlds. They've never been introduced to that second world, because of the generational trauma. Maybe their parents never left the reservation, or maybe their grandparents never left the reservation just for the comfort of home, you know. And what
And
does that lead to?
for anybody who doesn't know, what is the generational trauma? How does it happen?
Generation, like I just mentioned, generational trauma. It's something, for me, for example, um, my father had to endure watching his parents fight the fishing wars, and so that last generation, they carried all of that trauma into, our generation, and they had to endure a new world after losing their leaders in the fishing wars. And you've seen a lot of that last generation fall into addiction, fall into um, just the things that generational trauma brings. And then it slowly trickles from there, but there's still signs of it, you know.
Yeah,
And so,
it
a-
carries.
and then, my grandfather, he carried that generational trauma from everything that happened to his parents. And that gave him his vision, that gave him his drive, to fight back against the government. Um, so generational trauma is trauma, and it's the trauma that we carry with us into the next generation, whether it be through experience or whether it be through DNA.
Hmm. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
That's a tough one to fight. So, what are the mechanisms? I know you're gonna say good medicine. What is the good medicine that helps one overcome generational trauma?
I think understanding, you know, I think that's a big reason why folks can't escape the generational trauma is because of the mentality that they have, or the vices that they give into to cope with the generational trauma. I think for me, it's been the ability to see the world for what it is, and for me to try to gain a personal understanding of the non-native world and the native world, and try to have those two worlds meet in the middle, and so we can coexist, and so we can cope and deal with this generational trauma. Um, and then the insensitive way of putting that is, I try to live life without a victim mindset. Even though our ancestors were victims, and my grandparents were victims of cruelty and all that kind of thing, um, I don't choose to live my life feeling like a victim. And I think that's what the leaders in our fishing war era, they had that same mentality. Is they, while they were victims of crimes and discrimination and racism, they also endured that and faced that with courage, determination, and strength. And some didn't. And I think that that's that's true in today's world. Folks that have never left the reservation may have never been exposed to outside the reservation. So they don't know what it's like out there, and it's scary to them. You know,
That's interesting to think that way for sure. Um, my thought is, with so many young leaders coming up, who are the leaders of the Puyallup Tribe in 30 years, in 40 years? Who are those people? Those are the kids of today, right?
right?
Are the kids of today carrying this generational trauma? They must be. They have to be. With, let's just say that 97% is wrong, but let's just say it's 85%. I don't know. With that many dads gone, and I'd be interested to see the statistics from the 50s and the 60s, and I'd love to see it on like a 10-year curve. Has that gone up over the last 40 or 50 years? Has that gone down? I don't know. But what happens to the youth of today?
Exactly.
Hmm.
And I could speak for the youth that I impact and that I encounter, and I try to help all youth. I think in the best thing to do for them is to be sensitive to the traumas that they do carry, help them cope, help them identify, and then help them use those traumas for strength, for vision, for determination, and understanding.
Hmm.
And it's easier said than done, and sometimes it takes years and years of life experience and life situations that you have to endure. But there's hope. Our youth today are, there's great efforts in Indian country to keep youth engaged in sports and leadership activities, and all those things are going to prepare them to be good, great people and great
Canoe
leaders.
journeys. The canoe journeys is a good thing.
Canoe journey is outstanding. They get their culture, they have a alcohol and drug free environment. You know, they get to practice their cultural ways. They get to find their voice and learn how to speak publicly speak. They learn how to be the skipper of their canoe. All those good things that come with the canoe journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you think it's easier now for a kid growing up, for a youth growing up, or do you think it was easier when you were growing up?
I say yes and no. There's obviously a lot more financial benefits this day and age that our kids are exposed to, but I I really enjoyed the struggle as a youth and just the simple things in life that we got to enjoy as a youth. Little things like drinking out of the hose, you know,
I like drinking out of the hose.
little things like out catching grasshoppers and gardener snakes and building forts in the woods. You know, this day and age, man, I got to monitor my kids' screen time, and they're always on their cell phones or on their electronics. So that's while my kids are very active in sports, I also try to make sure they're present when we're at dinner or when we're together doing family things, and I try to be mindful of their screen time on their phones. Um,
Yeah, screen time
because
is hardcore.
it is.
Do you lock that
You'd be
down?
surprised. I'm not that heavy on it. You know, if they're not in my presence, I'm not monitoring their screen time. But if we are with each other, if we're eating dinner or, you know, I'll ask them to be present and put their phones away.
Yeah, that's cool. How does that conversation go? Hey, turn that off now. Or is it, I'd like you to be mindful of your screen time at this particular moment, and I would implore you to engage the family.
It's probably somewhere right in the middle of that. You know, I'm not so stern on them anymore because we have that respect. So now I could just say, "Hey, come on, we're at dinner. Let's go. Let's put the phone up." You
Put
know,
the phone up. There you go. Lock it down.
lock it down. And
So,
Ty,
oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, go. You go ahead.
I was gonna say my son Ty Jr. He just got home. I sent him to my buddy's house over in California. He's the coach of that club over there. He's the wrestling coach for the UFC star Brandon Moreno. He's got a great network around him over in California. Him and I have been buddies since high school. He's actually from over in that Marysville area, up your way, and
Yeah,
he took Ty into his home for about 2 weeks, and he has two twins that are a little bit younger than Ty, but the purpose was to get him out of here and get exposed to some good training over there in California, um, a morning routine, and um, you know, my buddy Izzy, you know, he would check in every night, and that's the big thing he talked about that he was hard on was the screen time. He's like, man, your Ty's always on his phone. I have to get on him, and so it kind of started over there, and then I continued it when he got home. Um,
yeah, that's
yeah,
cool.
great. Yeah,
How old is Ty Junior?
he's 15. He is going in. First day of school was yesterday as a sophomore.
Oh snap! Look
It
at
goes
that.
quick.
15 years old. I know my kid's first day of school is happening right now. They're off. This is it. See you later.
Yeah, here we go.
Another year in the books. So, as somebody who's run for tribal council in the past, if you were on tribal council today, or if you were, in that position, how would you be handling generational trauma?
Uh, let's see. Step one would be identifying the things that cause that trauma and acknowledging it to the community. You know, acknowledge the traumas that all, and not just one family, not just two families. We're not singling any families out. We'd be very inclusive of all families and all tribal people. But I think it's important to identify, you know, the things that cause the generational trauma or the traumas. And then you kind of work up from there. You talk about it with talking circles. Um, you honor the ancestors. There's not a lot of that today across Indian country because, and this is just my opinion, I feel like the tribal councils, ours and others, are just scared to honor individual tribal leaders for fear of offending other families. And so you'll see the tribe has a holiday called Today's Leaders and Past Leaders Holiday. That day used to be our old chairman Herman Dillon. It used to be called Herman Dillon Day,
Hmm.
and over time they decided to take that away from him and change it to Leaders Day, Indian People Leaders Day. And I think that's a slap in the face to the Dillon family. I don't know why it happened, but I feel like all of our past leaders should be honored and acknowledged individually. And for me personally, my grandpa included. My grandpa deserves a statue, for the things that he and others, did for not just our tribe, but all treaty tribes.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think when we talk about generational trauma, when you see your ancestors being acknowledged, there's some healing in that. And that's what I know that's what our Satiacum family needs personally, is that recognition that he deserves, so his soul can rest, and his brother's soul, my Uncle Buddy, because they're the ones that endured the most out of the family that we actually knew and were impacted by. And um, you know they experienced the most trauma. So if me or my family were to hear my grandfather and his brother being acknowledged and recognized, there would be some healing in that, for our family, and then we can just build on that from there.
Hmm.
And so for me, when it comes to dealing with generational trauma, first we need to identify what caused it, um, talk about it, and acknowledge it, because the more you bury it, and the more you bury it deep, deep down, the less healing and the more trauma that just causes in the long run.
Yeah.
You know, and then the other thing is just, um, once you've identified it, once we're able to talk about it, and somebody can say, "Yeah, I actually am experiencing generational trauma. My grandparents went through this, my great grandma went through this, or my aunts went through this and that." Once you're able to talk about it and identify it, um, I feel like you can now move forward in a new path with healing, understanding, and um, some healing for your heart. And then they can pass that on down to their children, and so you'll slowly start to see that generational trauma, um, trickle away. And you see it also in alcoholism. What causes alcoholism? Well, generational trauma ties into alcoholism and drug addiction, because that's how certain people choose to cope with that trauma. And a lot of these people don't even realize they have generational trauma. All they To them, they just like to drink, and they don't know why they're hurting. They don't know why they're in pain. They don't know why their heart hurts. And so they turn to these things, these vices that, help them cope. And so you see them pass that on down to their kids, because their kids watch that growing up, and then so forth. And so you hear a lot of people talk about break the cycle. You know, if you know, my dad drank a lot growing up, and so I made the vow that I didn't want my kids to see me being drinking. Right? I'm gonna do my personal effort to break this cycle. Right? And I think that, in my mind, I think that
Hmm.
every generation we're getting further away from that trauma. Right? And it's by breaking these cycles. Um, it's by not It's by personally me not feeling like a victim to the things I endured as a kid, because I understand why my dad went through those things and why he did some of the things he did. So that helps me to, one, forgive him, two, understand, and then now I can move to make sure that doesn't pass on to my kids. And in turn, they're not going to pass it on to their kids down the road, you know?
Yeah, I love that. I have a little thing that I like to go through. It's a 3-step process in solving a problem, and yours is very similar. Identify the problem, discover the root cause, solve the problem. IDS, identify, discover, solve. I love that. And it's a good way to go about solving problems. You know, you mentioned a lot about DNA, like, hey, this trauma is in our DNA. You know, interestingly enough, I took some kind of DNA test through this company called Everspan. They work with a lot of MMA fighters down there in California and a lot of boxers and stuff like that. But I took this DNA test and they, swabbed my cheeks and they came back and then I had a call with them and they're talking about my life. And it was so interesting. And this is another thing for another show. But what I found was that person who did the DNA test knew more about my life and my tendencies than any personality assessment I've ever taken in my life. She was able to say, like, hey, I bet if you come into a room and it's messy, like, it can cause anger. And here's why in your DNA. And oh, by the way, the addiction gene that prevents you from being
Yep.
addictive, you don't have it. So she said, I bet you have a very addictive personality. I bet you will be easily addicted to anything. And it doesn't matter if it's alcohol or drugs or work, you are very addictive in your personality. So I do believe that our DNA plays a lot into generational trauma, how we live our lives. As we bring this thing in for a close, what is one or two tips that you would share with the Native community on how to handle generational trauma and how to be better at home as a parent?
I think biggest tip, and I'll just go back to, how can you solve any problem, or how can we fix anything within ourself, or how can we help fix anything within our family if we cannot identify it first and acknowledge it?
Hmm.
You just can't. You can't grow from a mistake or a failure in life unless you identify and acknowledge what happened. And just like you said, your 3-step procedures, falls in line with kind of what I was talking about. Identify it and then find a solution, right? And
Yep.
then so the same thing is true with generational trauma. It's let's not let the traumas of our past generation, let's not let them weigh us down. When you start feeling that depression and you start feeling those things kick in, identify that, hey, this may be generational trauma. Like, I don't know why I'm feeling like this. Just out of the blue, I'm feeling down, I'm feeling out. Uh, Identify that it could just be generational trauma or any trauma, period. And so identify that, and then, don't let it weigh you down. Don't let it be the reason that you don't accomplish things in life. I think the tough way of saying it is, don't have a victim mindset. We're not victims. We are survivors. We're leaders. We're strong. And so find a solution. Why am I feeling like this? Oh, here's why I'm feeling like this. Okay, so I've acknowledged why I'm feeling like that. Well, now let's take active steps to stop feeling like this, and let's take active steps to make sure I'm not passing this down to my kids. So it's a lot of self-assessments, it's a lot of mediation or meditation, and I think if you could do those simple things, I think that people will be a lot happier in life, and they'll be raising happier children who will in turn raise happier children.
I love it. You heard it right here on Breaking Fry Bread. Tips from Ty. That could be a whole segment of the show.
Is that our new segment?
It could be a whole new segment. Tips from Ty. It's kind of catchy. It's kind of cool. But listen, join us in the following weeks, and check out what we got going on the show. If you like it, give us a like, give us a share. And what, you're on every social channel, so you're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube. You're everywhere, as
Yeah.
am I. So hit me up, follow me on all of those exact same channels. And if you want to get in touch with me, send me a DM on LinkedIn. That's the best way. And I think your preferred method of communication is through Facebook, isn't it?
Messenger.
Messenger,
Yep.
Facebook Messenger.
Messenger,
hit up
Instagram,
Brother
whatever
Ty.
it is.
Whatever it is, just reach out. Say what's cracking, what's going on. And we enjoy being here. And if you like it, give us a like, give us a share. And we'll see you on the next show.
Boy.